Okay, so you want to water fast for 7 days. No food. No juice, no broth, no electrolyte packets if you're doing it strictly. Just water for a full week. And the promise behind it is seductive precisely because it sounds so clean. No calorie counting, no meal prep, no willpower battles with a bag of chips at 9 p.m. Just stop eating and let your body do the rest. Proponents describe a kind of internal reset, fat melting away because there's nothing left to burn but your own reserves, inflammation dropping, mental clarity sharpening into something almost meditative. Some call it autophagy, a word you have probably seen thrown around online, usually accompanied by the idea that your cells start eating their own damaged parts and coming out the other side younger, cleaner, more efficient. There's a version of this story where 7 days of nothing is 7 days of your body finally getting a break from the constant work of digestion and using that freed up energy to repair itself instead. That is the promise. It's minimalist, it's dramatic, and it has just enough real biology behind it to sound credible. Here is what is actually happening inside your body while that promise plays out, hour by hour, day by day, and why the real story is both more interesting and considerably more dangerous than just don't eat for a wee. Your body runs on a strict energy hierarchy, and understanding that hierarchy is the key to understanding everything that follows. Under normal conditions, your primary fuel is glucose, sugar circulating in your blood, drawn from the food you just ate or from glycogen, which is essentially glucose in storage form, packed into your liver and muscles like a fuel reserve tank. Your brain, in particular, is a glucose-hungry organ. It makes up about 2% of your body weight, but under normal conditions burns through roughly 20% of your daily energy. Almost all of it is glucose. So the very first thing your body does when you stop eating is start drawing down that glycogen tank. This doesn't take long. Liver glycogen, the reserve your body can actually convert back into blood sugar, typically runs out somewhere between 12 and 24 hours into a fast, depending on your activity level and how much you had stored to begin with. Once that tank is empty, your body has a decision to make, and it's not a decision in any conscious sense. It's a hormonal cascade that's been wired into mammalian physiology for millions of years, back when food scarcity was a regular seasonal event, not a lifestyle choice. The hormone driving this cascade is insulin, or rather the absence of it. When you're not eating, insulin levels drop, and a related hormone, glucagon, rises to take over. Glucagon is essentially the release the reserves signal. It tells your liver to start manufacturing new glucose from non-sugar sources, a process called gluconeogenesis, which just means making new glucose. Your liver does this by breaking down amino acids, largely pulled from muscle tissue, and glycerol, a byproduct of fat breakdown. This is the body's stopgap measure, and it's metabolically expensive. Burning your own muscle for fuel is not a strategy any organism wants to rely on for long. So somewhere around the second or third day of fasting, a second and more efficient system starts to take over: ketosis. Your fat cells begin releasing stored fatty acids into the bloodstream in large quantities, and your liver converts a portion of these fatty acids into molecules called ketone bodies. Ketones are essentially an alternative fuel source that most of your tissues, including, critically, your brain, can learn to run on. This is the part of the story that fasting advocates love to talk about, and for good reason. It's a genuinely elegant piece of evolutionary engineering. Your brain, which can't run on fat directly, gets a workaround, and your body shifts its primary fuel source from sugar to stored fat, sparing more of your muscle tissue in the process. By around day 3 or 4, most people are in a state researchers call nutritional ketosis, with ketone levels in the blood rising to several times their normal fasted baseline. This is the physiological mechanism behind almost everything people report during a water fast. The mental clarity, the reduced hunger after the first couple of rough days, the sense of lightness. In the short term, the numbers are genuinely dramatic, which is part of why water fasting has such a devoted following. Weight loss during a 7-day water fast is fast and substantial, often somewhere in the range of 5 to 10 pounds, sometimes more. But this number is misleading if you don't know what it's actually made of. A significant portion of that early drop is water weight. Every gram of glycogen your body stores is bound to roughly 3 to 4 grams of water. So as you deplete your glycogen reserves in the first couple of days, you're shedding water right along with it. Later in the week, as ketosis deepens, your kidneys also begin excreting more sodium and water as part of the hormonal shifts happening in response to lower insulin levels. Actual fat loss is happening too, but it's a smaller slice of that headline number than most people assume. Other measurable changes show up quickly as well. Blood pressure typically drops, sometimes significantly, within the first few days, partly from fluid loss, partly from reduced sodium intake. Resting heart rate often falls too. Blood glucose stabilizes at a lower, flatter baseline since there's no food-triggering spikes. Studies on ketogenic and fasting states have observed measurable increases in markers associated with autophagy, that cellular cleanup process, within roughly 24 to 48 hours of fasting onset in animal models, though the exact timeline and magnitude in humans is still an active area of research. And much of the more dramatic autophagy language you see online outruns what's actually been confirmed in people. Subjectively, most people report the first 2 to 3 days as the hardest. Hunger pangs, irritability, headaches, sometimes nausea, often difficulty sleeping. Then for many, something shifts around day 3 or 4 as ketosis fully kicks in and reported hunger drops noticeably. This isn't universal, and it isn't magic. It's the metabolic switch from glucose dependence to fat and ketone dependence settling in. So far, this all sounds like the system working exactly as designed. And for a healthy adult doing a short, well-supervised fast, in many cases it largely is. But this is where the story most people hear ends, and where the more important story actually begins. Here's the thing almost nobody mentions when they talk about the reset of a water fast. Your body isn't just burning fat while you fast. It's also actively breaking down lean tissue, muscle, and in some cases even heart muscle, the entire time, and it doesn't fully stop just because you've entered ketosis. Ketosis reduces the rate of muscle breakdown compared to the first couple of days of fasting, but it doesn't eliminate it. Your liver still needs a steady trickle of amino acids for gluconeogenesis because a small percentage of your daily glucose needs, red blood cells, parts of your kidney, and a portion of your brain, can't be met by ketones alone, no matter how deep into ketosis you are. That amino acid supply has to come from somewhere, and the most available source is muscle protein, including, in prolonged fasts, the protein structures of your heart. This is the part the detox framing tends to skip over. Your body isn't a machine sitting idle, patiently waiting to be cleaned. It's an organism under genuine physiological stress, actively cannibalizing its own tissue to keep your brain and vital organs running. Studies on prolonged fasting have documented measurable declines in lean body mass, and more concerning in longer or repeated fasts, changes in cardiac muscle mass and function, since the heart is a muscle too, and muscle is muscle as far as the breakdown pathways are concerned. There's a second layer to this hidden cost, and it involves electrolytes, the minerals like sodium, potassium, magnesium, and especially phosphate that your cells need to do almost everything, including maintaining a normal heartbeat. When you stop eating, your insulin levels drop, and insulin normally plays a quiet but essential role in keeping potassium and phosphate inside your cells where they belong. With insulin low for days at a time, these minerals can shift and deplete in ways that don't always show up as obvious symptoms until they've gone quite far. Your body's feedback signals, thirst, hunger, energy, are not well calibrated to tell you your phosphate is getting dangerously low. You can feel completely fine, even clear-headed and energized from the ketosis high, while a quieter, more dangerous shift is happening underneath. This is the real second-order effect. The calm, controlled fat-burning story your body tells you through hunger and energy levels is not the same as what's happening at the cellular level, where muscle tissue, including cardiac tissue, is being consumed and mineral balances critical to heart rhythm are drifting, largely silently. The danger in water fasting rarely comes from the fast itself. It comes from the two edges around it, how long the fast goes, and, more than almost anything else, how it ends. Duration matters because the muscle and electrolyte cost compounds. A 24 to 48-hour fast is a very different physiological event than a 7-day fast, which is again different from fasts extending into multiple weeks under medical supervision. The longer the fast, the more lean tissue and mineral reserves get drawn down, and the research on fasting longer than about 5 to 7 days without medical monitoring shows a clear rise in cardiac and electrolyte-related complications. 7 days sits right at the edge where this starts to matter, which is exactly why extended water fasts are generally recommended only under clinical supervision, not as a solo home project. But the more dangerous threshold, the one that catches people completely off guard, is the moment the fast ends. This is called refeeding, and it is where the real medical literature on fasting fatalities concentrates almost entirely. Here's the mechanism. After days without food, your body has downregulated its insulin response and depleted its intracellular stores of potassium, phosphate, and magnesium. Even if blood tests would still show these as roughly normal, because your body has been quietly borrowing from inside your cells to keep blood levels stable. The moment you eat again, especially if that first meal is carbohydrate heavy, your pancreas releases a surge of insulin. That insulin does exactly what it's supposed to do. It drives glucose, along with phosphate, potassium, and magnesium, rapidly back into your cells. But because your total body stores of those minerals are already so depleted, this sudden intracellular shift can crash blood levels of phosphate and potassium to dangerously low levels within hours. This is called refeeding syndrome, and phosphate is the critical one to understand, because phosphate is essential for producing ADP, the basic energy currency every cell in your body runs on, especially heart muscle cells. A sharp drop in phosphate can impair heart function, cause arrhythmias, muscle weakness, respiratory failure, and in documented cases, sudden cardiac arrest. And the trap is almost perfectly designed to catch people off guard. You feel like you survived the hard part. The hunger is over. You're about to reward yourself with real food. The danger zone isn't the fast, it's the celebration meal at the end of it. There's a case that's often cited, sometimes almost celebrated, in fasting circles. A Scottish man named Angus Barbieri, who in 1965 undertook a supervised fast that ended up lasting 382 days. One of the longest medically documented fasts on record, conducted under the observation of physicians at the University of Dundee. He was significantly overweight at the start, consumed only water, tea, coffee, and vitamin and mineral supplements, and lost an enormous amount of weight over the course of the fast, later keeping much of it off for years afterward. The case is frequently told as a triumph of willpower and a proof of concept for extended fasting. But the part of the story that actually matters, the part that explains why this worked instead of becoming a tragedy, is almost never emphasized. It was medically supervised for the entire 382 days, with regular checkups, and critically, the refeeding process at the end was slow, gradual, and clinically managed over an extended period, precisely to avoid the phosphate and electrolyte crash described above. Contrast that with the far more common pattern seen in case reports of fasting-related deaths and hospitalizations. Otherwise healthy people undertaking unsupervised extended fasts, sometimes far shorter than a year, who feel completely fine throughout. No chest pain, no obvious warning signs, and then develop cardiac arrhythmias either during the later days of the fast or, more commonly, within the first 24 to 72 hours of reintroducing food, particularly when that food is a large, carbohydrate-rich meal eaten quickly rather than reintroduced gradually. Medical literature on eating disorder patients, who are especially vulnerable to refeeding syndrome for related reasons, has documented this same mechanism causing sudden, fatal cardiac events in patients who appeared clinically stable right up until the crash. So the honest answer to, how did this happen to someone who seemed fine, is, because feeling fine was never a reliable signal in the first place. The warning system that would tell you your phosphate is dropping doesn't really exist in any way you can consciously feel. The Barbieri case worked not because the human body handles year-long fasts effortlessly. It doesn't, but because every dangerous threshold along the way was being watched by someone with a blood test, not just a mirror. Here's what the difference actually looks like in practice. Done within evidence-based limits, a water fast is short. Most clinical and research protocols studying water-only fasting in generally healthy adults keep it in the range of 24 hours up to about 5 days, and longer fasts of a week or more are generally recommended only with physician oversight, sometimes including baseline blood work to check kidney function, electrolytes, and cardiac risk factors beforehand. It's approached with realistic expectations about what's actually being lost, a mix of water weight, glycogen, some fat, and some muscle. Not a magical fat-only process. And critically, it ends the right way. Refeeding starts small and slow, often with something as modest as a small amount of broth or a few hundred calories of easily digestible food, gradually increasing portion size and complexity over 2 to 3 days rather than diving straight into a large meal. People with a history of eating disorders, heart conditions, diabetes, kidney disease, being underweight, pregnancy, or who are on medications like blood thinners or diabetes medications are generally advised against water fasting without direct medical guidance, because their margin for error on these exact mechanisms, electrolytes, cardiac strain, blood sugar regulation, is much thinner to begin with. Done wrong looks almost identical from the outside for the first 6 days. Same hunger curve, same ketosis, same reported mental clarity. The difference shows up at the edges, pushing past day 7 without any medical check-in because you're feeling great, ignoring symptoms like dizziness, heart palpitations, or extreme fatigue because they get reframed as just part of the process, and then the step that actually causes most of the documented harm, breaking the fast with a large, rich, carbohydrate-heavy meal, because after a week of discipline, that first meal understandably feels like it should be a celebration. That single decision, eaten in the span of 20 minutes, can undo a week of careful metabolic adaptation and trigger the exact electrolyte crash described earlier, in someone who, an hour before, would have told you they felt completely fine. None of this is medical advice, and it isn't meant to be. This is a description of documented physiology, not a personal recommendation, and anyone considering an extended water fast, particularly beyond a day or 2, should talk to a doctor first, especially given any of the risk factors mentioned above. The danger of a water fast was never really the absence of food. It's the moment you decide the hard part is over.